the MicroBrewr podcast. Here's your host, Joe Shellaroo.
Hello and welcome to the second MicroBrewr podcast. This is the spot if you're thinking about starting a brewery, want to take your brewery to the next level, or just want to contribute back to the craft beer movement. I think you've come to the right place. So we have made it all the way to podcast number 2. So I've officially doubled my number of podcasts in one day. So I'm going to have a beer after this or something to celebrate. First off, I just want to say thanks to all the support that we've got for MicroBrewr. We launched, and within the first week, we already had over 25,000 different unique visitors. So the support has just been amazing. All the contacts that I've got, everybody who's called or emailed, it's just been great hearing everybody's stories. And that's really one of the fun things about starting this site, is just getting to hear all the stories. And speaking of different stories, today we get to hear from Eugene from Alamo Beer Company in San Antonio, Texas. I really wanted to talk to Eugene because he took a very different approach than I've seen a lot of other brewers take to get into the craft brewing industry. And Eugene will walk us through his story. So at this point, let's just jump right in. All right, so today we've got Eugene coming from the Alamo Beer Company down in San Antonio, Texas. And how are you doing today, Eugene?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to visit with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you joining, man. So for anybody who's not really familiar with your brewery, can you just kind of start and tell us your story? Maybe start with the beginning?
Well, a long time ago in 1836, actually that's probably too far back, but that's when the Battle of the Alamo was here in San Antonio. But if we go back to 1884, there was actually a company in San Antonio that made a beer called Alamo Beer. It was the San Antonio Brewing Association. That later changed to Lone Star Brewing Association, but somewhere along the line there was what they called Prohibition, and as a result, Alamo Beer went away. After Prohibition, they never brought back the brand. So I kind of had a gee whiz idea, is why don't we have an Alamo Beer in San Antonio, and was able to revive the branding, and that was about 10 years ago. That we actually had our product come to market on a contract brewed basis, which is kind of unique for Texas and a lot of other places. That I started by contract brewing under a special arrangement rather than starting my own little brewery.
So going back, so you really like the name, the Alamo Beer Company. Can you go through how you registered that name and licensing and different things like that for us?
Right. I was actually able to register the trademark, so I actually own the trademark for the word Alamo as it applies to beer. And I was fortunate enough to team up with the guys at Real Ale Brewing Company up in Blanco, Texas, which is less than an hour drive from here. And we put together a product and started to market it and got it into a few bars and restaurants. And then our big grocery store chain here in San Antonio called me, which that rarely happens, but called up and said that they had heard about the product and wanted to know if I was interested in visiting with them about selling it in their stores. So that was a big deal, and that was 10 years ago this past July. They really liked it. They liked the branding. It was a retail account that really liked to support local. So they originally wanted to put it into 30 stores, and I said, oh, hold on a second. It's just me and an old minivan delivering the beer. Except when I was driving the minivan, it was called the Beer Wagon, just so I could maintain a little bit of that macho, you know. So started with those 7 stores and kind of grew it from there, and now it's in, probably over 100 of those grocery stores, and about 900 accounts total across Texas.
Oh, man, that's awesome. So you covered a lot there, so I was wondering if we could break each part into a little more detail.
Sure.
So once you got the name, trademarked it, went through all the licensing, you found a different brewer to work with. And so can you walk us through the piece of how you approached that, how you decided that the relationship would work well for you, and just go through that detail?
There was a Lone Star Brewery here in San Antonio shut down and laid off 600 employees. And there was a big story about it in the paper, and it's like, man, I really need to follow through with my idea and brew this beer. I mean, you can't, lay off that many local folks and still call yourself the national beer of Texas. So it kind of got me rallied to the call of following through with this concept. And then I heard about this brewer, Real Ale Brewing Company, that was close by. I gave the owner a call, a guy about my age, and told him my idea. And he said, yeah, I'm interested. Let's talk. And went up there and got there at 6 in the morning and was helping the guys brew and learning at the same time. And I was in there shoveling out the spent grain, and the owner of the company looks up and realized that it wasn't one of his guys. And he said, Eugene? I said, yeah, Brad. And he says, yeah. He says, so you're serious about this? And I go, yeah. And he says, well, as soon as you're done doing that hard work, come into the office and we'll talk about this. So what turned out to be just an idea. I mean, he was only doing probably about 500 barrels at that time, so still real small. It was in the basement of an antique shop just off the town square up in Blanco, Texas. So real small operation. The fermenters were all horizontal tanks because they couldn't fit any verticals. There was only about 8 foot of clearance. So it's pretty much cobbled together, but he liked the idea, and we hammered out an agreement that I would do all the sales and marketing, they'd make the beer, and we kind of went from there. So we had I like to call it a special arrangement, because it's not really a contract brewing like a lot of them were. It was really more as I licensed them to use the name Alamo as it applied to beer, and so really licensed them to use that trademark. Although I got a royalty that paid for my sales and marketing efforts, so we were kind of off to the races after that.
Oh, okay. So you essentially let them use the trademark Alamo and then helped them out with the marketing of the beer, and then got to brew at their facilities too.
Yeah, they had nothing to do with the sales and marketing of it. They really just brewed it. And we did that because, it was pretty complicated back then as to how do you do a contract brewing arrangement. Is it an alternating proprietorship? Is it a standard arrangement? We really didn't know, so this is the concept that we came up with to really do a licensing agreement. And so all the sales and marketing of the product was my responsibility. At the end of the day, it worked for us for the way we were doing it. I also used one of their formulas that they were already using in a different marketplace, and it was only on draft, so at the time we thought it was a pretty good idea, and it didn't cost. It was really no headache because he didn't have to create a formula. We didn't have to really jump through any hoops. We could work off the same batch. So it was really early on. It was a relationship that helped him and it helped me. And that grew dramatically over about 5 years, and then we finally separated the twins, and as in the twin formula. When I finally got my own distributor on board, is we changed our formula, and that's been over 4 years ago, probably close to 5 years ago now, that Alamo became its own unique formula. And we didn't, it wasn't like a old Coke, new Coke sort of change of formula. It was slight, but it was enough that if you were a beer connoisseur, you know the difference. But if you weren't, it didn't offend you that it would change slightly. So it just worked out really well to do it that way.
So you're making one type of beer, Alamo Golden Ale. A lot of other craft brewers that are coming onto the scene are making a multitude of varieties of beers that are coming out. Can you walk me through the decision on you just choosing to focus on one type of beer instead of going through a wide variety?
Well, since I was contract brewing, I didn't have that much flexibility because I couldn't do, the minimum orders at the time. I think he was on a 15-barrel system. I wasn't selling enough beer, so it just really worked out well to do it the way that we did. As we grew, then it got to the point, well, maybe I could have done a second brand, but the reality is he wasn't really set up at Real Ale to do another brand for me. And so I kind of by default, I stuck with the one brand, and we did about 3,000 barrels this past year, which is pretty good for just one style of beer that doesn't have a whole bunch of dollars or marketing behind it. So it was really by default that we stuck with the one style. So made sure it was one good one, and we were able to really kind of build a brand following in South Texas. And now the distributor is a statewide distributor. So we're really looking forward to the opening of our new brewery, and then that's when we'll actually expand the product line.
So you've got a statewide distributor, and I'm really curious how you set that up. Did they seek you out, or did you find them? How did you get that whole system set up?
Well, that's a good question. It actually, we had started to sell so much with my retailer, and that was direct from the brewer to the retailer, and I was delivering it and selling it, and they wanted to bring it into more stores, and I was close enough with the retailer where they said, "Hey, Eugene, you need to figure this out, because if it's just you, there's no way you're going to be able to service 100 of our stores." And I said, "Well, you're right." And I've been looking at several different distributors. I was fortunate enough where there was a statewide distributor that was interested in the brand, and it was the same distributor that my brewer was using. And I also had a local distributor that did 4 counties around San Antonio, a very good distributor, and they were interested. So when you get 2 interested parties in a brand, and you've got the state's probably biggest retailer selling the product, they both really wanted it. So I was in a fortunate situation where they were both willing to pay some good money for it. At the end of the day, the statewide distributor kind of made an offer I couldn't refuse, and that doesn't happen very often. It's very rare that you could take a small beer brand and actually get paid for the distribution rights into an area that would be considered green space. At the time, we were only selling in the areas around San Antonio, but this large statewide distributor, they wanted the whole state as a contract, so they paid for unproven territory. And unfortunately, the other guy that was a little bit smaller with the 4 counties, they couldn't come up to that level. And at the time, I really needed the cash to continue my business operation, and it worked out well. That's not the case now with a lot of beers, but the good thing was the timing was right for me, and I had 2 interested parties, and it was a deal that just kind of came together that's really worked out.
Can you describe where you're selling the beer right now? How much are you selling in bars compared to liquor stores? I know you were talking about different grocery stores too. Can you go through that?
Yeah, we're probably about 60% off-premise, which would be your retail, grocery store, convenience stores, and things like that. And the other 40% would be the bar and restaurant market. And that division between kegs and bottled product is probably about 30% kegs and about 70% bottle.
Any recommendations for anybody who's starting to look at working with a distributor? Anything that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, well, in the state of Texas, and every state is different. So one, learn your state's laws. But the other one is, I mean, you're basically handing over your baby to somebody else. Distributors are generally really good at delivering product. They vary along the way as to who's going to actually help you promote it and grow your brand. Some distributors expect for you to have your own sales force out there. Other smaller distributors will want to say that they're going to partner with you and, really push your brand, and you'll get their share of mind. So you really need to do your research beforehand and, not just look at, oh my gosh, they have Budweiser in their portfolio. They're going to, do great things for me. That's not necessarily true. I mean, depending on your product, you may want to go with somebody that's really known as a specialty beer distributor. Or with my product, I'm actually looking to be a little bit more of a crossover between the mass-produced domestics and the specialty craft brews. So my decision to go with a house that carried a lot of Budweiser actually probably helped to grow the brand, and most certainly will as we expand our brewery. But it's a very personal relationship. If I had it to all do over again, I probably would have started in my own backyard and done it in such a way that make the area within 50 miles of your brewery, make that your turf. Find a distributor that's really strong in your backyard and go from there. I think that's a better way to build the brand. I think it's a better idea for what we call craft beer, or in some instances, craft beer is really supporting your local business or your local brewer, and that becomes more and more important as we get more and more craft brewers. Is the loyalty, I think, should be in your own backyard, and then kind of go from there.
When you're going with the bigger distributor, how much marketing are you doing? I know with smaller distributors, they can usually help you out more for marketing, but when you're trying to reach the wider audience, how much are you doing to promote the beer?
Well, there's two things. I mean, with a big distributor, they're in every single account. They will have a salesperson that calls on every single account. With a smaller distributor that's more specialty, they may only be hitting the cream on top of the crop there, and they'll have accounts, but they probably are not real deep in the market. They're just in the ones that are specialty beer. You can do well with either one as long as you know what you're getting into. I do think you really need to work closely with your distributor in such a way where they should know who you are when you show up. And I say that, and there's probably people that laugh, is like, how could they not know me? Well, some of these distributors are huge, so it takes a lot of effort to work and to stay in front of them so they know, hey, you're the guy with the little brewery that they're supposed to be selling the product. So we can't compete like the big guys do and offer all these sales promos and, dollar promos and things like that. It just doesn't work for the small craft guy. I think it's important that you maintain at least some of your own sales force, and it doesn't mean that you're out there every single day doing it, but most certainly you need to be out there promoting your product at the different beer fests and events, and calling on different restaurants and key bars yourself, so you start to make that connection between the guy that owns the company and the particular product.
So what are you doing for marketing right now? What seems to be the key things that are driving the sales of Alamo Golden Ale?
Well, for me, the best way to promote my beer, it's basically me and a keg of beer and enough people to drink it. So when you're pouring a beer, you're handing it to somebody, you're talking with them about it. They're making that personal connection with your product and the guy that runs the company, or the guy that brews the beer, or the assistant brewer, or whatever. It's really that personal touch that the big guys can't do. I mean, I don't know anybody that Augie Busch personally handed a beer to and said, hey, how do you like it? So I think that's where we have the advantage as smaller craft brewers, is get to know your neighbors, get to know your own backyard, and get to be known as the beer guy for your community.
So are you specifically going out to like different bars?
I'm doing the bars. I'm doing a lot of in-store samplings, actually, which is a good way to connect with the customer in a non-bar environment. But as far as events, some of the things we do is early on I found that the folks that run 10Ks and other fun run sort of events, at the end of a run, is they really appreciate having a good beer to drink. So it's been 10 years now that I've actually sponsored different running events. And when I say sponsor, my idea is I'll show up with the beer if you put my logo on the T-shirt, sort of thing. But you've got, anywhere from a couple hundred to 1,000 runners at an event, and you're handing them a beer. It's a good social environment, and they really appreciate it. The only thing I have a hard time getting used to is most of these running events early in the morning. So, by about 10 o'clock in the morning when the race is over, I'll end up having a buzz on before noon. So, but it's a good following. They're a good crowd, and it's been easy to do. I do an awful lot of the nonprofit events, and the smaller ones that you can get into and you can afford a keg or doing a silent auction item donation. But craft brewers have been very well known for donating their time and their product to help charitable causes, and that's something that I've really stuck with that model as well.
All right, so for a lot of these things, you're providing all the beer for free, and then you're letting them taste it, get to know your brand that way through these different events.
Yeah, so it becomes really, I think, what craft is all about. I mean, it's word of mouth. It's very organic sort of marketing. We've done very little paid-for marketing, and it seems at the end of the day, the stuff that I do pay for doesn't quite have the return that the stuff that you're personally showing up at and you're at an event making those personal contacts.
Hey, that's awesome, man. So switching topics a little bit, I know that you've been in the planning stages of starting your own brewery, and I'm wondering if you can start talking about that and describe to our audience the different steps you've gone through.
Well,
if you know where to start.
Yeah, it really started day one. I mean, I knew that my contract brewing arrangement with Real Ale was going to be temporary. I just didn't think it was going to end up being 10-plus years temporary, but there was a lot of benefit to working on this contract arrangement, proving that my brand works. So about 3 years ago, I really realized that, okay, it's time. The brand works. I can afford to borrow and beg and raise some capital and move forward because I have a good business plan and I have a proven business model, which is much different than a lot of startup brewers that they may have something that they've home brewed and go, oh yeah, try this, we want to sell it. Well, I already had everything in place. I mean, I had a major retailer, a major distributor, good product, great branding. What I really needed to think about as I went forward is how could I do this in the most efficient way possible? And I toured probably 30 or more different breweries. And brewers are very friendly and open. Many of the breweries I just went on their standard tours. Others I had met the guys at the Brewers Association, which I guess if you haven't become a member of the Brewers Association, do that right away. It's a very cost-effective learning tool to help you decide about going forward on things. But I toured
they've got a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, I toured all these different breweries, and at the end of the tour and working with the folks and asking questions, the most valuable question that I asked of anybody was, if you had it to do all over again, what would you do different? And in essence, what you were doing was saying, hey, what was your mistake? What did you screw up, and how would you not do it again? But you ask it in such a way where it's, you're not putting blame. You're getting the most valuable question answered. And through that, what I really found is most of the brewers, when they were building their brewery, is they did not plan on the explosive growth that they end up getting. And we're very fortunate in craft brewing that, a good number of the folks are 20, 30, 40, 50% growth a year. They're really rocking and rolling, doing a great job, making great beer, and really growing. But they didn't plan their facility to grow that fast. So as a result, there were some inefficiencies that ended up getting built in along the way. So my key concern in building my own facility was it needs to be designed and laid out in such a way where it knows where the growth goes. And I'm not saying that we're building our brewery right now and it's going to make 40,000 barrels tomorrow. But everywhere on that plan is laid out knowing we're going to grow to 40,000 barrels, which is our goal. So we have a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3, and such, with a whole bunch of dashed lines on there, so I know where pieces of equipment go. I know when we reach a certain threshold of number of barrels a year, that's when we go ahead and pull the trigger on the next phase. So it's very laid out, and a lot of folks did not have the ability to do that. One of the ones that I learned an awful lot from was the folks at Ninkasi out there in Eugene, Oregon. They make fantastic beer, but they grew so fast, and this is several years ago when I was there. they were already on their third brew house in, I think, about 5 years. And so when they started, they had no idea they were going to grow that fast. And now I think they're contracted to enlarge even more. So it just goes to show that if you don't have it planned out on paper, you're going to get caught by surprise. And fortunately, I mean, they've continued to do really well. But other brewers I've known is they can't grow any further because they're either landlocked or they've got other retailers next to them that they would have to move their whole facility somewhere else. So that the idea of planning for whatever your ultimate goal is go ahead and plan for it. Know where that next fermentation tank's going to go, know where your extra warehouse is going to go, and have that plan in mind right when you start. And it might be you start out as a nano, and when you reach X number of barrels, it's like, okay, now I'm confident that we can move up to a larger system somewhere.
Yeah, I like that strategy a lot. I mean, when you're starting out, you're definitely going to be capital constrained. When we're talking about capital, just the amount of money that you have for funding your brewery. But as you go through, I mean, you've definitely got a leg up on the different competition because you've already established distribution. You've got your brand out there, which makes it easier for you to get capital.
Well,
so I've seen a lot of other breweries throughout the industry that they start out too small. And then when they do that, they're continually having to change different locations because they're expanding so quickly and a lot more quickly than they planned on at the beginning.
Well, you use the word capital and easy in the same sentence, which is very dangerous because
my bad.
I will tell you that as fortunate as I was to get it's actually a $5 million SBA backed loan that we closed the day before the government shut down, which is a whole other story, but fortunate that we did because there could have been a further delay in going forward. But as much as you think people love your product and they love your beer, at the end of the day, I was surprised how many people said they were going to invest but didn't. And then the people that ended up investing, some of them weren't even on my radar. So it was interesting. Whatever your number of months is to raise the capital, I would go ahead and just double it to be safe because it's going to take longer. Start working with a banker early. There's usually the folks that are involved in the SBA lending, there's a real incentive for them to help out new small businesses. And it's no secret, breweries get a lot of press. It's an exciting industry. People like to read about it, and your bankers get excited about that. So if you kind of start early on some of the SBA-backed programs or working with a banker, don't be afraid to start early. It really will benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, and you called me out. I should have said easier, definitely not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no such thing as easy capital, but I was fortunate enough to be able to raise the money that we needed. I was fortunate enough to work with a bank that was just starting their SBA program in San Antonio, although they're a statewide bank in Texas. So they had a real incentive, and they actually looked at my original pro forma, and they came back and said that they thought they could loan me more than what I was looking for, which was great because that was that much less capital I needed to raise on my own, and ultimately that much more funds I could keep, or that much more ownership I could keep myself and my own brand.
So when you were trying to find a banker, how did you do that? Who did you go through?
As far as the corporate structure and the fundraising?
Yeah, to try to get the cash for the brewery.
Yeah, well, with anything, it's really friends, family are your two key ones to start. If you can't convince a friend or a family member to invest in your company, you're not going to be able to convince a stranger to invest in your company. So don't be afraid to try it out on friends and family and get their feedback. Get their honest feedback. It'll give you a better presentation when you're actually trying to get it. Be conservative in your numbers. Banks are conservative. Most investors are conservative by nature. You do have the benefit of folks. There will be some folks that won't want to invest just because they like your beer. But don't count on that crowd for the majority of your funding. But there will be those folks there. But it takes a long time. I mean, it's at the end of the day, you can have the best business plan, but it is still an investment by an investor that is very risky. It's not a stock. It's not a proven stock. It's not a bond. It's not a savings account. So this needs to be money coming from folks that, one, they can afford to lose it. If you take somebody's money and at the end of the day, if they lose that money, it's going to be hardship on them, don't take their money. Really suggest they go with the lower amount because you don't want that on your conscience. I mean, you're going to work as hard as you can to make your company successful, but if for some reason it isn't successful, boy, you don't want the downfall of investors that shouldn't have been investing or invested too much. So also the other thing with investors is, communication with them is important. But also you need to find investors that are not going to be driving all your decisions unless you've picked them for that role. I mean, I have one of my investors is a lawyer, and I'm glad he's on board because he can help with the legal stuff. Another investor used to work with a major brewer, so he's got good background. But you don't want to have 100 investors and have everybody calling you up telling you what to do all the time. You really want to put together an investment group that lets you run the show, lets you drive the decisions, and then you decide whose advice and counsel you want to go to make sure you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I think that's just great. I think strategically picking who you want instead of just taking anybody's money who's throwing money at you. It's really thinking about who you want involved in the business with you going forward.
Yeah, and make sure you have the right business structure to start with. I mean, we're set up as an LLC, limited liability company. It might make sense for other people to set it up differently, but that's something you want to visit with the lawyer about, is what makes most sense for your business plan as to how you set up your company structure.
So after having to do all these things, what's your advice for somebody who is thinking of starting a brewery right now? Are you enjoying it?
I do like it. I tell you, there's one incredible thing about the craft brewing industry is, the people are friendly. At this point, at least in Texas, we're not competitors. We're true compatriots. And folks really work together. If you have a brewery up and going and you have a piece of equipment that you're having trouble with, you call up your friend over at the other brewery and see if they've had the same trouble. And how do you work it out? So it's even through the forum with the Brewers Association, a lot of sharing of knowledge goes on. And there's not a lot of industries that I've been in where you have kind of that camaraderie of working together to promote a product, even though you're a little bit competitors because there's only so many tap markers that you can put out in the market. But the good thing is it's good, friendly folks that most of us have a common goal. And I think it may have been Sam Calgione there with Dogfish Head. I went to a conference probably 5 years ago, and he said that we're very fortunate to work in an industry that is 99% asshole free. And that's true for the most part, except inevitably you will run into that 1% that is the asshole, and you that ends up being your bad day for the year. But for the most part, it's a great group of guys and gals that have a common goal of brewing really good product and getting it out in the market. And it is fun. It's amazing when you tell somebody that you make beer or sell beer, that the conversation, or you tell them your job and they think, oh, it's their dream job. Yeah, it's a bit of a dream, but there are times that, there's nightmares along the way, but it's a pretty darn good industry to be a part of.
Yeah, you're right. The people in this industry are just awesome. So we've got to get wrapping it up. I was wondering if you have one last piece of advice for anybody who's thinking of getting into the brewing industry.
Raise more money and plan for more time. It would be the main thing. Just keep a positive attitude. Do not go into it underfunded, I guess would be the main thing, because it's really difficult to do things long term on a shoestring, and it's not always. If you think your beer is the best beer in the world, well, that's your opinion. There might be a whole bunch of other people that disagree. So make sure you get plenty of folks to sample your product, and not just people that you know are craft beer gurus. I mean, get some of the other folks as well. And hopefully, just as more and more brewers focus on brewing good local product, I think that's going to be the continued increase of our industry, and we'll continue to eat away at some of the big guys because more and more folks want to support local. I mean, I do that in just the way I live my life here in San Antonio. Is I try to frequent local restaurants. I try to source things locally. And that's really what our industry is all about, is helping out the other small business folks.
So if people want to find more about Alamo Beer Company and support you locally, where's a good place to check you out?
Oh, alamobeer.com is our website. We also have a Facebook fan page, which is, I think there's a couple Alamo Beers on there, but it's the one that's facebook.com/Alamo Beer, all one word. You can keep up with us on that. The other thing that we've done, too, is we've got a retailer here in Texas called Specs Liquor. So folks can actually order Alamo Beer online through Specs Liquor. It's not, by the time it gets to your house, it'll probably end up being about $25 a six-pack, but still kind of fun. They ship all over the U.S., and it really depends on what county and state if you can do it. And I just had some people recently do that for Christmas, and they were real satisfied with the way that it took place.
I like it. And what we'll do is we'll have a page set up for the show notes for this podcast. So if you're interested in checking out Alamo Beer Company, we'll have a page set up with all the links so you can check out Eugene and his company.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'm still sitting outside. Although the sun's gone down here, I'm still in short sleeves.
And I envy you for that.
Well, I tell you, we don't have in Texas. I'm glad that our brewery is going to be making probably about 75% lagers, 25% ales. There's a strong demand, I think, for products that are a little bit more sessionable, and that's what we're going to stick with in our product lineup.
I like it. Well, again, thanks, Eugene, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
All right. Next time you're in San Antonio, give me a call. First round's on me.
All right. I appreciate
your way.
it.
I hope you show me some of your favorite locals.
Yeah, will do, man. All right. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, and I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Eugene. So like I was saying before, I was really excited to get him on because taking the different approach of going to a different brewer, seeing if they've got excess capacity for you to be able to brew, it can be a good outlet to get into the craft beer industry without having to put up the $1 million plus or minus a couple $100,000 to get in and start your own brewery. So this can really give you a taste if you don't want to put your whole retirement online or can't get the money to start up your own brewery, to really show and demonstrate that you've got good demand for your product. And once you get that, it's a lot easier, not easy, but a lot easier to raise money for funds for starting your full brewery at that point. And that's exactly what Eugene's done. So for the show notes for this, it's at microbrewr.com/session2. So it's session number 2, and MicroBrewr again is microbrewr.com. So microbrewr.com/session2. And if you see Alamo at any of your local stores, make sure to pick up a 6-pack to support Eugene and the great work that he's doing. And then finally, just we're continually trying to give back at MicroBrewr, and one of the ways that we've done that is we created an ebook on how to market yourself online through different social media outlets, and we offer this for free. If you're interested, all you have to do is go to microbrewery.com/ebook. I'd love to hear what you think of it. And then also, if you got any stories you want to share, you just want to talk to me, see what beer I'm drinking tonight, you can always contact me. My email is joe@microbrewery.com, or else you can go onto the contact page on microbrewery.com itself. So again, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate the support, and we'll see you next time for session number 3.
Thanks for listening to the MicroBrewr Podcast with Joe Shelleroo. We'll see you right here next time at microbrewer.com.